my my man only does marijuana, but he does very good stuff. So anyway, there was an experience though where the Telemax, and this is where the, Telemax is today's Yahoo. You know, they really made the wrong choices. You know, and went down the wrong roads. I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody, but here I am down Palookaville. So, anyway, they get offered $25 million by American Express to buy them out. Okay. Oh no, we got big plans here because we're losing money hand over fist, and our parent company, Maxon, is getting tired of putting money in here and saying it doesn't come out. And anyway, American Express ends up coming up with Space Bank, which is more than 800 number with the reservations, you know, through the phone. And that was a very competitive. What bring Telemax down though was another bad decision. They needed a bigger. They just weren't generating revenue for their high costs. This equipment had to have maintenance, had to pay for the lines, computers. So in order to get this contract with Best Western, yeah, they undercut everybody else, but Best Western required a terminal in each and every of their 1,000 motels. You know, each little mommy pop place out in Podunk, and so Telemax had to pay for lines out there, and then Maxon, the parent company, they invented this new terminal for Telemax, which was specific for Telemax because they, you know, wanted business and. Anyway, they spent all this money on this expensive terminal, and I was out in the field for 6 months taking all these, doing all these installations. It was cool, you know, on the expense account. Loved it. You could put 14 terminals in a station wagon, a national rent-a-car, and you got green stamps for all the money in it. I would buy a bucket of Colonel Chandler's Kentucky Fried Chicken and have that for dinner. Oh, I was in heaven. Ah, gonna last forever like that. But anyway, so Telemax. Maxon loses interest in losing money. Telemax doesn't get all the terminals installed in the date required, so Best Western doesn't have to pay them any money, and they declare bankruptcy. Before bankruptcy, they were bought out by another asshole company that made even worse decisions, and so anyway, they went bankrupt. I was out of work. And I was engaged at the time, and I was in the Air Force. Yeah. So what happened with the Air Force is when I moved to New Jersey, I transferred to McGuire Air Force Base, and these were in these cool 141 Starlifters where you didn't have to do any work. All the cargo was on pallets. You just put it in there, locked it in there, and took off. So anyway, I did a lot of flying with the Air Force. That was cool. And here we flew actually with the, with the active duty people. We weren't separate and had our own planes, you know. We flew right with the whole, and it was cool. They did what's called staging. The crew would land the airplane. There would be another crew ready to take the airplane off, and you would go into crew rest. And then when you would come out of crew rest, you would wait for the next plane. So you didn't have an itinerary. You just took wherever the next plane was going, and what you did, you committed to like 2 weeks. So it was really fun, and that's where I got a lot of my cool stuff to bring, because you had a lot of space to bring stuff back. But anyway, I was living with one of my friends from Telemax who bought a house. He was actually living with his girlfriend, so I had the first floor in the basement all to myself. And I built, I still have one of the boxes. I built 3 big 2 foot by 4 foot by 1 foot boxes, wood boxes that I filled with dirt, and I grew my own in this little separate room in the basement. I had some seeds, and I didn't know nothing about nothing, but there was mildly successful, and I had quite a stash from that. Funny thing too was there for a time there I had a roommate, and after I harvested all the leaves. And I didn't really have buds, it was just all leaves. I put it in the oven. And I didn't turn the oven on, I just put it in the oven because the pilot light. Anyway, my roommate comes home and he turns on the oven. I didn't have all my stuff in there, it was just a small part. So that was a cool story. But anyway, I grew my own there, and it was a successful operation. I still have one of the 3 here that I, down in the basement, that I used to store small pieces of firewood. That was it. Basically, it's a straight life. I got a great job with Rapid Data time sharing, and then I got an even greater job with NBC in Manhattan. So I was a commuter, and the reason I mention that is I have memories of this would be New York in the late '70s. Yeah, well, and I ended up working 4 days a week, so I would go home at 6. That way I didn't have to commute that extra day, and actually I gave them 1 extra hour for doing that. I worked 10 hours a day. And anyway, I just remember coming back through the zoo of Times Square, and how the weird people would come out at night. You know, all with obviously some kind of problem, probably on something, and you just wanted to avoid it. But you didn't want to walk too far away because you didn't want to be on a street there was nobody, and you didn't want to be on a street where too many. So there was no golden mean. So it usually meant walking down 42nd Street. But I can just remember so many winos and people with other problems. But the popular brands that I can remember so clearly was a Wild Irish Rose. That was one of the bottles of cheap wine that we would drink, and the other was Midnight Express. Yeah, so that gave sort of negative connotation to thinking about it. So anyway, there was like nothing after that, all the way up to retired in 1999 and 2003. And this wasn't, I didn't seek it out, just the opportunity came to me. A friend, a newer friend of mine, said, gee, I've got stuff here, are you interested? Yeah. And so he gave me like a couple of joints. Let me try this, see if you like it. And, oh, I remember that experience quite well. So this was after, years and years of nothing. There were a couple of other small occasions there, but nothing big. Yeah, I remember smoking that joint for the first time here. So this would be the first time I smoked here. And, I had a really, so it was sort of an epiphany. I remember the thought. I mean, when I got high, I started, of course, to relate to all the previous times way in the past that I had gotten high and how long ago it was. But this like was then a connection to all of those feelings. And the visualization, I always like to visualize, think of something in 3 dimensions. And so I was thinking of this God's head, a pulsing God's head, and this would be sort of like the surface of the sun. And so this marijuana brought you back to this, and when you're on the God's head, that's when you're connected to all of your previous feelings that you've had at that time. So this is a very strong experience that I could relate to from the past. So I was definitely interested. So I just bought an ounce from him. I believe it was $500, yeah, at the time, and it was great stuff. I really enjoyed it. Yes. And but I, like my father, and knowing my past and my cravings for this altered state, and now having the money and the access, and not the danger, just the danger doing the transaction, but it was with a friend, so you could feel confident. So I don't remember how long it took me to smoke that ounce, but I decided, yes, this is a good thing. I'm retired here, and this is good, so I'll make this part of my life. I was concerned about like the slippery slope of an alcoholic, but I made my first big buy, and I bought it was $3,000 worth. So I think it was yeah. So it'd be six ounces. I was very scared. I was concerned too if I got ripped off. I took a little postal scale with me. He was sort of insulted by that. But after that, we have. I mean, it's a great connect. And he isn't the source. He has a source, but I've never asked who that source is. And I was never sure whether he makes money or not, and I'm sure he does, but it's certainly not much. So I think he's just, and he doesn't solicit me other than the first time. So I'm the one that comes to him. He's never. He came to me once because he had a good stash. It was good. Yeah, I call it the vin extraordinaire as opposed to the vin ordinaire that I drink daily. But anyway, so I made that first big buy, and I remember purposely stopping smoking, for maybe 2 weeks, just to make sure, there wasn't a problemo here. And yeah, it's never been a problem. In fact, just recently, like my bronchial started going out on me, so I've been on the wagon for about 4 days. So this is extra enjoyable tonight here, because what happens when you, well, I'll get into that later. Let me go back to my list. Yeah, so so I have my source here. Oh, and this, I won't go off into this vein because I did on my Ishi Trust talk. Yeah, I went into music, into science, physics, mathematics, quantum mechanics. And of course, mental, because all of the time and quantum, it all brings in consciousness. The observer, always has to be taken into account. It isn't separate from the environment. But I've gone into that before, and I'll be going into that at other times. And then, of course, I got into Buddhism, very heavily into Buddhism. That sort of brought it all together to me. And in fact, there was this book. It wasn't actually a written book. It was a collection of other writings, and it was come on, I can get the Zen. I don't think I'll be able to remember the name now. But anyway, it follows the close connection between the unity of Buddhism and the effects of some of the psychedelic drugs and other drugs. But anyway, I got heavily involved in Buddhism too, and I got into this sort of Buddhist flower child kind of compassion for everybody and everything, and that'll make all well and good. But I know one thing I jumped, and let me go back to that because I want to bring in a piece of reality here. Back after that trip I had to San Francisco, I was at home again and waiting basically to try to get into the spot in the Air Force. So I had free time, and I took a bus trip up to San Francisco, specifically to go back to Haight-Ashbury to have another experience because I had no local, access. And I remember very poignantly my mother had a difficult time confronting or talking to me about this issue, but she, in fact, I was going to get this letter. Oh, I forgot to get it. Yeah, she wrote me a very poignant letter that I believe I still have, and she was so concerned about me because she knew where I was going, and she knew what the people in Haight-Ashbury were like, and I was going through the devil. Yeah, and this did really bother me, but I had to be my own person. Getting back to the point that I wanted to make was, when I stayed up there, I did have a good experience. I found a place with, I met a guy, and he was living with his girlfriend, who was actually the only one working, and so paid for the apartment. And he and his two friends were all freeloading, offer a place there. So I was, and they had a girl who had just hitchhiked. So I mean, this was a real, and so I had some good experiences there. But this was starting to turn ugly. This was just about the time, if you remember, they had this parade, the death of the hippie. And there wasn't actually, I don't remember, I think I was actually there at the time, but I didn't attend. But I remember in Golden Gate Park, where you would see large groups of people, you would start to see on the fringes, people that were like frothing at the mouth. And I remember very clearly one guy that had cracks. Whenever he'd open his mouth, he had open cracks that were very deep, right on his corner of his lips there. Oh, God knows. And then remember talking to this other guy who he always got on, he had just an obsession with, shooting stuff into his vein. And God, yeah, that stuff just repulses me. I've never snorted, never shot. I guess the only other thing I can remember taking is these capsules that you would break, where you get a quick rush just to revive people. But that was nothing, and that was only on one occasion. So anyway, the reality of the world and trying to be compassionate, that ran headlong into problems, and that goes the direction of Ishi Trust. But I am staying here on the topic of altered states of consciousness. And I must say I had and it wasn't, I would say, an epiphany when I became a Buddhist. Multiple epiphanies, and not maybe so as sudden, but there was one occasion where, I enjoyed Koyaanisqatsi when it came out, and I think it was about '84. It was the first program I ever recorded on my new VCR. And I remember how much I enjoyed the music and how drug-related that music felt, especially when they did those fast scenes in New York City. So I just loved his music. But anyway, I come to find out then it came to be a trilogy, Koyaanisqatsi and Nicoyaanisqatsi. And I started to find out that this was Philip Glass's music, and I was going to the library. I started to check out his stuff, and when I learned about his person, he had an epiphany in India, where he came back and essentially renounced all of his earlier work and made this big transition to where he's has become. So, and he was a Buddhist, and he was one of the three co-founders of Minla Mountain Retreat and Tibet House. So anyway, I purchased Nicoyaanisqatsi. I might mention too, going back to Koyaanisqatsi, the first one. It basically goes from nature, to mechanical to man, and then it ends up in that big 3-minute disaster of that rocket ship going up and coming back down. But anyway, when they make the first transition from nature to mechanical, they show this big truck with this guy walking in front of it, one of these open pit mine kind of trucks. But the funny thing, seeing that movie from '84, that big truck, that could come out in the stool of the trucks that come out today. I mean, that thing is a pipsqueak compared to the trucks they have today. So at the time, this was a big truck, but today it's not. But anyway, I bought Nicoyaanisqatsi, and that's visually, I mean, that is, whoa, that is just some trip. So anyway, I decided that one night I wasn't sleepy, and if I'm laying in bed and I can't get to sleep, I said, well, it's no use laying in bed, let me think of something to do. So what I thought to do is toke up and watch Nicoyaanisqatsi. So this would only be about maybe the second or third time. So anyway, I get this sudden feeling, and this is where I'm getting the connection to Buddhist thinking of the Buddha nature is the feeling that there is essential goodness in all sentient life, that it's a negative karma that brings out the negative feelings in us. So I really get high, and in the beginning of Nicoyaanisqatsi, if you watch it, there's a scene there where it's computer generated, but it's like a moving landscape, and then there's a moving mountain coming out of the landscape too that's getting bigger. And I got this feeling that this coming out, what this was coming out was the Buddha nature. And it was like the Buddha nature just coming out from within me and having this feeling of bliss that, ah, yes, it's true that you're at your inner core there is goodness. Yeah, so that was quite an experience, and I think I'm simplifying by saying this was the only strong experience. I've had other strong experiences, and I have a very strong experiences. Say with music, I have an excellent sound system here, and I can really crank it up. And I got all my favorite stuff recorded. Although by now I've heard it so many times that it's sort of like Van Gogh. I mean, after you've seen all of his stuff and been amazed, you know, many, many times, and are so happy to see a new piece of his work that you hadn't seen before. Basically, there's, you know, and I'm not saying music is dead. You can only spend so much time following it, and music goes in, you know, certain ways, and that are like disco. You know, that are ways that you like and don't like, and I haven't had any new stars here, and all my old idols are getting old, as we all do. So I'm sort of locked into my musical library. But getting back to my list here, oh yeah, so as part, I'm not going to get big in the Ishii Trust, but to apply for the life insurance, you know, watch my Ishii Trust thing. I had to stop smoking marijuana long enough so it wouldn't show up in my blood, and they wanted me to wait 2 months, because one month is safe and 2 months is good, because I was already what's the word? I have already admitted to them that I smoked marijuana. And although I didn't have to tell them, because whenever they say, how much do you smoke, you know, I mean, a joint is not, you know, quantitative thing. I, of course, have always been a lone smoker, so I knew all my purchases. I kept track of all my purchases, and I knew what I had on hand. So I could figure out that over the period from 2003 to 2010, I consumed, on average, just a little over a ½ ounce a month, which really isn't a lot. Yeah, and so that I can't remember how often, but I would be usually not real often, but when I did, I would get intensively high. Yeah, not intensively high, but I would get, you know, higher than just maybe initial. So. And I tried different ways of smoking. What I end up doing is smoking in a short pipe. I'll do it right now. Excuse me. I gotta go to the bathroom. No, I didn't. So, where was it? I'm glad I got the sheet of paper. So, yeah, so that made me feel good. And I had no problem stopping. In fact, I haven't had a problem this last 4 days. In fact, I keep on, because I still have a little cough. You can hear that bronchial now. So it's gotten much better. Get to a point, though, where you just have to stop, because if you're irritated at that time, then you're really going to go downhill. So, anyway, but part of the Ishii Trust was my new philosophy of nothing exceeds like excess. So, and keeping track of my usage, you know, in my 3-year game plan here, I basically said, well, hell, you want to smoke, smoke. And, you know, if I could, I'd like to stay, you know, in this altered state on all my waking hours. Yes, I would. But ain't possible. And but what I wanted to say is I've gone from ½ an ounce to 2 ounces a month. So I'm really a daily user here. And the bad part, those two, well, and, you know, I can deal with it. Of course, the lungs, it's very hard on the lungs. and you build up more of a resistance. So you have to, and there's a point where you just can't stay up there. You know, you have to come on down, because you just, it'll maybe bring you up for a short time, but then you'll need, so you end up having to smoke constantly. And it's really wasteful to do that. But what I wanted to point out is, you know, if you take the classic bell-shaped curve, and with marijuana, it's not so bell-shaped. It's sort of skewed, where it goes up sort of vertical up the, that's not an escalator, you know, it's an elevator. And then comes down more slowly like that. But if, you know, if you wanted to stay at a certain level, you end up, when you start coming back down, then you have to go back up. And so to keep above there, and one sort of obfuscates the other, so it becomes less pleasant and distinct. It's like when you eat a number of separate kind of foods. This is what always bothered me about a 12-course Chinese meal. You know, you have so many diverse foods that each one is good, yes, but when you mix them all together, quite often I get queasy at the stomach after eating such a diversity. But that point being made here, I think it's better if I weren't on this, you know, hell-bent path. Because of the diminishing returns, there is a benefit to, you know, to having separate events that don't overlap. So I don't know if I'm going to try to get into that mode. I tend to slip into my other mode. And I can only usually be up about half of the day. And I just sort of randomly pick this time or that time, but I certainly smoke a lot. I'm getting near the end. Like Philip Glass, I've rejected my path. My path. My past. I hope that wasn't Freudian. Yeah, meaning, you know, I grew up in not complete, but in pretty much ignorance of my situation, being part of the baby boom, and in La Mirada, where within the span of 10 years, the whole topography was rearranged. All the orange groves and olive trees, the only ones were left were the ones I would leave in the front yards of the houses, and just miles and miles of development, and the gas was 23 cents, you know, a gallon, and that's the way things were going to be forever. And when we went back to that area of La Mirada that we lived in, there was no open land anymore. I mean, there were farms. That area was dairy, essentially, from between La Mirada and where Cerritos College was. I would ride my bike. That was all dairy, and I would actually slipstream behind hay trucks, you know, all these dairy farms. And that's all gone now. It's all business and commercial. My God. And Dana Point, and all that Laguna Niguel and all that stuff. It's God. Oh, I hate to think about it. How did I get back on that topic? I already told you about mushrooms, and I'm near the end here. God, can I talk? Hour and 45 minutes. But anyway, I think I first heard it from Dylan on Scorsese's review. It was very good, too, for Martin, my buddy Martin, to stop when Dylan had his motorcycle accident. Yeah, in fact, let me make a comment here. You know, I was so much into Dylan that, as many other people, I mean, and how he can go from that extreme to, and it came to a point where I stopped listening to his new stuff. But there were two things, I think, that made me say, okay, well, you got to remember the past. The first was when I heard he became a born-again Christian. You know, I feel that's a true cop-out. And then, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago or so, on Christmas. Now, I don't know who produced this CD, but Bob Dylan Christmas music. If you can imagine Bob Dylan singing Jingle Bells, that's exactly what it sounded like. So I think he just smoked too much dope. Yeah, I think he did. Yeah, but he was certainly hot when he did it. But it's something like Muhammad Ali, I think, you know. But what I want to do on my remaining days is stay in my altered state of reality, because the real reality ain't so fucking good, and I can see where it's going. And just like that commercial, you know, those fucking Republicans are going to pander to human desire and needs, and nobody's thinking about, oh, it's not, you know, population. Yeah, it's got to be what it's got to be. I'm telling you, you know, Easter Island, here we come, big time, total collapse. The Earth is going to survive. The Earth is going to regurgitate, you know. It's going to recycle us. And there will be another environment. But it's got half the time to do it in now. You know, it took, you know, since the Cambrian explosion to have anything happen. It took 4 billion years before that you get single-cell life. So, you know, I'm all for no suffering. How did I get back on that? I want to remain in a constant state of becoming. Yes. Because you never want to feel that you're enlightened or that you've arrived. Because what do you do tomorrow? That's what Heidegger's book was all about. Not that I could read. That's too heavy for me, but at least I'm familiar with it. You know, first he wrote a book, Time and Being. It might be the other way around. But then he decided he had it wrong, so he wrote a follow-up book called Being and Time. Because time always flows. That's one of my conundrums is, you know, how can space-time just be? I mean, how can anything be without time? Because being requires time. If you had no time, there would be no being. But now that you have time, because of impermanence. So, you want to try to stay in a constant state of becoming. But, you know, entropy wins. You know, all is impermanent. Including this